everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You ever feel like, life is just constantly throwing you curveballs?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
bam, 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 one after another.
It never stops.
It never stops. So today we're diving into something that might help you navigate those, those unexpected detours.
Right?
And it's called a risk register.
Hmm.
And it's way more interesting than it sounds, I promise.
Yeah, a lot of people hear risk register and their eyes kind of glaze over.
Right? It sounds very corporate-y.
Yeah, they think like, oh, that's for like businesses and corporations.
Yeah.
But actually, what's really cool about a risk register is that it helps you think through those what-if questions
Yeah.
in a really structured way. And this applies to anything, not just business.
Okay, so this is like for everyday people like me.
Absolutely.
I can use this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. Okay, so the source material that we're looking at today is from a podcast episode called Risk Register, a roadmap to effective risk management. And they describe it as a living document that's always evolving to identify and tackle risks.
It makes sense.
But how does that translate to real life?
Okay, so imagine this. You're planning a huge family reunion.
Oh, boy.
You got flights. You got catering.
Oh.
You got the whole shebang.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
Now what could possibly go wrong? Think about it.
Oh my gosh, where do I even begin? Like, you've got Aunt Mildred, who is notorious for missing flights.
Right.
The caterer could totally just, like, not show up.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And then let's not even get started on the potential for just, like, family drama explosion.
Oh, absolutely. Every family has that.
Right.
So a risk register basically helps you map out all of those potential disasters.
Uh-huh.
You can figure out how likely they are to happen,
Yeah.
how bad the fallout could be if they did happen,
Uh-huh.
and then you can start coming up with strategies
Okay.
to prevent them,
Gotcha.
or at least minimize the damage.
So it's like a plan B.
It's like having a plan for your plan.
Okay, I like it.
So instead of just like stressing about Aunt Mildred missing her flight, you could book her on an earlier one just in case.
Yeah, great idea.
Right.
That's actually very smart.
So you're not just passively hoping for the best.
Yeah.
You're actively taking control. And that's what's so powerful about this.
Okay.
It helps you shift from being reactive to proactive.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light here.
Good.
But let's break it down a little bit because the source material talks about 7 key elements of a risk register.
Okay.
And I think this is where it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah.
What's the first thing I need to know?
Well, the first thing you need to do is define the risk really clearly.
Okay.
So instead of just saying like travel problems,
Right.
you would get specific like Aunt Mildred missing her flight or caterer cancels last minute.
Gotcha.
That level of detail is really going to help you target your efforts later on.
So be specific.
Be specific, yes.
Okay, so I'm guessing then the next step is figuring out how likely each of these disasters is to actually happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
That's where risk likelihood and impact assessment come in.
Okay.
So we're not just listing out these risks, we're actually ranking them.
Yeah, okay.
So you want to think about things like, is Aunt Mildred habitually late?
Yeah.
Has this caterer ever bailed on a client before? Looking at those kinds of things will really help you prioritize which risks you need to focus on the most.
Okay, so I've got my list of potential disasters all ranked by how likely and how disastrous they could be.
Right.
What then? Do I just like sit and stew about it?
No.
What do I do?
That's where the fun part comes in.
Okay.
That's where you get to come up with a risk mitigation strategy.
All right, so this is plan B.
Yeah, this is where you brainstorm ways to prevent the risk from happening,
Uh-huh.
or if it does happen, to minimize the impact as much as possible.
Okay, so let's brainstorm. So if we're worried about Aunt Mildred missing her flight,
Yeah.
maybe I could arrange for a family member who lives near her to drive her to the airport.
There you go. That's a great mitigation strategy.
Yeah.
Or you could book a refundable flight for her, just in case.
Oh, that's even smarter.
Right. So you have options.
I like options.
Exactly.
Okay, but what if, despite my best efforts,
Yeah.
Aunt Mildred still misses her flight?
Oh.
Is my whole plan ruined?
Well, that brings us to residual risk,
Okay.
which basically acknowledges that you can never eliminate risk entirely.
Oh, okay.
Even with the best backup plan in the world, there's still a chance that something could happen.
Right.
And she might miss the reunion.
Yeah.
So it's all about managing expectations and understanding that even with the best laid plans, some things are just out of our control.
Wow, that's deep.
Right.
Okay, so we've got our risks all defined. We've got them ranked.
Yeah.
And we've even got backup plans.
We're on a roll.
All right.
What's next? Next up is figuring out who's in charge of each risk.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is where the risk owner comes in.
Gotcha.
Someone needs to be accountable for monitoring the situation and taking action if needed.
Okay, so this is like the point person.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in the case of Aunt Mildred, maybe her designated driver becomes the risk owner for that particular risk.
That makes sense.
Right. So they'd be responsible for making sure she gets to the airport on time and everything's good to go.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this helps ensure that nothing falls through the cracks.
Oh, I see. I see.
Right.
Okay, this is all starting to make a lot of sense.
Good.
We've got a clear picture of the risks,
Yes.
how likely they are,
Yeah.
how bad they could be,
Yep.
ways to prevent them,
Right.
and who's in charge of each one.
You got it. Is there anything else?
One final but very crucial element is monitoring and review. So a risk register isn't a one-and-done deal.
Okay.
It's not like you just create it and then shove it in a drawer.
Right.
You need to check in regularly,
Okay.
see if anything has changed, reassess your strategies,
Yeah.
make sure it's all still working.
So it's like a living document that you constantly update and refine.
Exactly. It's a living, breathing thing. Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered the basics of what goes into a risk register,
Yes.
but how do we actually put this thing into action?
Let's find out.
I guess we'll have to find out in part 2.
Part 2.
All right, so we've got our risk register all built out.
Mhm.
Aunt Mildred is safely on that plane, and the caterer has pinky sworn that they will not ghost us.
That's a relief.
So now what? How does this document actually help me manage this whole reunion shebang?
Well, so one of the things that it really helps you with is prioritizing.
Okay.
You might have like this huge laundry list of all the things that could go wrong,
Right.
but you can't tackle everything at once.
Of course not.
Right. So the risk register helps you focus your energy on the things that matter most.
Oh, so it's like a roadmap
Yeah.
for disaster prevention.
Yeah, exactly.
Showing me like which routes need the most attention.
Exactly. So those high impact, high likelihood risks,
Uh-huh.
those go straight to the top of the to-do list.
Okay.
But it's more than just a to-do list, though. It's also a really powerful tool for strategic planning.
Wait, but how does knowing what could go wrong help me plan?
That seems kind of counterintuitive,
Yeah.
right? But it's not.
Okay.
Because by understanding the risks, you can actually make smarter decisions about how you're going to use your resources.
Okay.
So whether that's time or money or even just like emotional energy.
So like if my risk register is just like screaming family feud
Right.
as a major concern, I might just allocate a little more time
Exactly.
to pre-reunion peace talks.
Yeah, exactly. You're anticipating those potential problems and you're being proactive about addressing them.
Okay, I like it.
And that actually brings us to another key used for the risk register. Communication.
Wait, how does a dry document become a communication tool?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It creates transparency.
Okay.
So sharing the risk register with like the key players involved
Yeah.
can help get everyone on the same page about the potential challenges.
Like instead of keeping my anxieties bottled up inside, I could share the risk register with like my siblings or cousins or whoever is helping me plan
Exactly.
to just be like, hey guys, this is what I'm thinking about.
Yes, it's like a preemptive strike against misunderstandings and finger pointing down the road.
Oh, I like it.
And can actually lead to better collaboration as well.
Okay.
Because everyone can sort of contribute to finding solutions.
So we're all in it together.
We're all in it together.
Okay. I like it.
Okay, so we've got prioritizing, we've got strategic planning, we've got communication.
Yeah. Anything else?
Don't forget about compliance.
Oh, right. Compliance.
A lot of industries require regular risk assessments,
Yeah.
and a detailed risk register shows that you're taking it seriously.
So if the reunion catering goes sideways
Oh,
and Aunt Mildred ends up suing me for food poisoning,
let's hope that doesn't happen.
I know, but just in case,
Yeah,
can I point to my risk register and be like, hey, look, I tried?
well, maybe not in court,
Okay.
but you get the idea.
I get the idea.
It shows that you've taken reasonable steps to identify and manage those potential problems.
Okay. I'm officially convinced this risk register thing.
I told you.
It's a game changer. But let's get practical here.
Okay.
Our source material mentions like a 6-step process for building one.
Right.
And frankly, it sounds a little intimidating.
Don't let it overwhelm you.
Okay.
Start simple, and
Yeah.
you can build from there.
All right.
The first step is just identifying those risks like we were doing with your reunion.
Okay, so brainstorming all the potential disasters.
Yeah, just get it all out there.
All right, but how do I move beyond just like listing them? How do I actually assess, how likely and how impactful they could be?
It's a mix of research and experience and good old-fashioned common sense.
Okay.
So, for your reunion, you might look at like historical weather patterns for that time of year,
Uh-huh.
or, maybe do a little research on the caterer.
Right, look at those Yelp reviews. All that
Exactly.
bit.
So, just tapping into your inner detective, gathering clues, and making educated guesses. I can dig it.
All right, so once you've got those risks identified and assessed, you assign a risk owner to each one,
Okay.
just like we talked about with Aunt Mildred and her airport chauffeur.
Gotcha. So everyone knows who's responsible for what.
Exactly. Accountability is key.
What about those mitigation strategies? Any tips on coming up with those?
Just think of it as brainstorming solutions.
Okay.
So let's say you're worried about bad weather for your reunion.
Yeah.
Maybe you rent a tent as a backup plan.
Okay.
If you're worried about family drama,
Oh, boy.
maybe you strategically seat people who
Oh,
tend to clash at opposite ends of the table.
that's brilliant.
Right.
Pro-level reunion planning tips right there.
There you go.
Okay, so I've got my risks, I've got my owners, I've got my strategies.
Yes.
Where do I actually keep all this information?
That's where your template comes in.
Okay.
It can be as simple as a spreadsheet or as fancy as specialized software.
Gotcha.
But you'll want to include all those key elements that we discussed earlier. Okay, so each risk gets its own row
Mm-hmm.
with details on its likelihood, impact owner, mitigation strategy, all that good stuff.
Exactly. You want to keep it all organized.
Sounds very organized.
It is, and then finally make sure you review and update this thing regularly.
Okay.
Life throws curveballs, remember?
All right. So no stuffing it in a drawer and forgetting about it.
Exactly. You got to keep it alive.
All right. So we tackled Aunt Mildred and the caterer and even strategized those seating arrangements.
Hopefully no food poisoning lawsuits.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But this whole risk register thing, it's not just for, family reunions and parties.
Oh,
though.
definitely not. No way.
Okay, good.
This is something you can apply to like big life decisions.
Mm.
Buying a house, changing careers, even starting a family.
Hmm.
I mean, all those things have their own what ifs.
For sure.
Okay.
So let's say I'm thinking about taking the plunge and starting my own business.
Right.
How would a risk register fit into that?
Well, think of it as like your secret weapon for navigating that whole entrepreneurial roller coaster.
Oh.
Right. So first things first, you got to identify those potential risks.
Okay.
So maybe your product doesn't catch on,
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
right? Or you underestimate the competition, or maybe you run out of funding before you even break even.
Those are all pretty terrifying.
Yeah, the kind of things that keep you up at night,
Right, exactly.
staring at the ceiling.
But instead of letting those fears paralyze you,
Yeah.
that's where the risk register comes in.
It helps you face them head on.
Okay.
You analyze each risk. You think about how likely is this to actually happen? What would the impact be if it did happen? And then you start brainstorming solutions.
So if I'm worried about running out of funding, maybe I explore different financing options.
Exactly.
Or I start with a smaller venture to kind of test the waters.
There you go. You're not just blindly jumping into the unknown.
Yeah.
You're taking calculated risks.
I like that. Calculated risks.
All right. And that's a really key takeaway here. A risk register isn't about avoiding risk altogether.
Right.
It's about making informed decisions even when there's uncertainty.
So it's kind of like having a safety net.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
So even if I stumble, I'm less likely to totally wipe out.
Exactly. It helps you weigh the pros and cons,
Yeah.
Anticipate those potential challenges and have a plan in place to deal with them.
I see.
And this applies to like any area of life,
Okay.
not just business.
So whether I'm planning a family reunion or launching a startup or even just like deciding which route to take to work,
Yeah,
a risk register can help me navigate all those decisions more effectively.
absolutely. Got it.
Awesome. So what's the core takeaway for our listeners today?
Let me think about that.
What's like the one thing they should remember about risk registers?
Well, I think it's important to remember that it's not about becoming a worrywart
Right.
or like obsessing over every little thing that could go wrong,
Yeah, no one wants to live like that.
right? It's really about shifting from a reactive mindset
Okay.
to a proactive one. It's about empowering yourself to make smarter decisions
Yeah.
and to feel more confident even when you're facing uncertainty.
That's a good one. And the beauty is it's a flexible framework.
That's right.
You can adapt it to any situation, big or small.
Exactly.
So whether you're a CEO or a student, a parent, or an entrepreneur,
Doesn't matter.
a risk register can be your secret weapon for just navigating all those twists and turns that life throws at you.
Remember, the future's always going to be full of unknowns.
That's true.
But with a little forethought and planning, you can turn those unknowns into opportunities.
I love that. So it's not about eliminating risk.
Yep.
It's about managing it.
There you go.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of risk registers. Hopefully you guys found it insightful and empowering, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.